So today I'm going to talk about the way that I shoot the English longbow. And the reason I'm going to discuss this is because there's a couple of things that I do that are maybe a little bit unconventional or a bit different, but things that I think really contribute to how well my shot works for me. So I want to share these things with you, and if there's anything that you guys do, or you guys see me doing, that you think doesn't work so well or might work better, please let me know. So, let's get started. The first thing about how I shoot is how I grip the bow. But I've already done a short video on this, so I won't go into too much detail. But I try and grip it in a conventional sense, with my palm sort of hand face down, and it creates sort of a nice sort of angle here. With the arrow slits on, it's very stable in my hand, and I grip it with quite a loose grip, just clasping my fingers around the edge here, and that's enough for me to really keep hold of it without death gripping it. Obviously grip's important because it needs to be consistent, because it's our arrow shelf as well, if nothing else. So if we're shooting target archery in the UK, you're more likely perhaps to be shooting with a sort of recurve style anchor point. But irrespective of that, whether it's a low anchor or a high face anchor, I'm essentially doing the same thing. But my first thing in my sequence, if I shoot an arrow, so the first thing I do is I come up and I'm setting my shoulder. And the place I set my shoulder, rather than it being sort of floating forward, I sort of press it back in and extend my arm out as far as it sort of can, as far as it sort of goes that way. It doesn't create the best alignment for me. I think I can move my arm around this way a little bit more, but the place it sits is incredibly stable. And I don't know if this works so well for me because it's just something that I've been doing for so long, or if it's something that just genuinely fits my body type, my body shape. But what's important about that particular element of it, of my shot, is that it really helps me create lots of stability with my front arm. So one of the things I think is most important about longbow is having a really, really stable front arm. Because there's no weight in the bow, we've got no stabilizers or anything like that, it's incredibly hard to keep that front arm steady. So the more things we do to help keep that arm steady, the better, really. And for me, having that shoulder, it's in a neutral sort of position. I don't think it's shrugged. Occasionally when I get lazy, I shrug my shoulders. You've probably seen that in a few videos. That's not particularly a good thing that I do, but it's set. I set it down and it doesn't really move then. The rest of the shot is about me wrapping this arm around. Whether it's a low anchor or a high anchor, I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm bringing it around. The only difference is, with the lower anchor, it's easier for me to engage those back muscles and to really wrap that shoulder blade around. So the leading shoulder, it's not pinched in. I'm not pinching both together. It's just relaxed. It's just static. And the reason being, it really helps absorb a lot of the energy from the bow and from the shot, and that helps keep that arm steady. Something that I see happens a lot is because of the way that the longbow transfers energy out of the shot. It can be really easy to float around and release when you float past the goal, or drive-by shooting, I've heard it called. Or it can be incredibly easy to catapult your arm as you're about to release. And that particular part of my shot, that shoulder position, really helps that. So you might also notice that my front arm maybe looks a bit bent. It's not bent, it's just not straight. And that might sound a bit dumb, but what I mean is I'm not locking my arm out. I think when I've got a locked arm, the transfer of energy from the bow just makes me rattle and shakes, and it really deflects the arrow left or right, mostly left. But with that bit of slackness in my front arm, it helps take the energy and it really helps me stay stable. My front arm really doesn't move when I shoot, and that is, I think, 90% of the battle, provided your front arm's good and your release is smooth. you're going to shoot a good shot. But that's really, really, really crucial thing for me, that front arm steady. I have tried to create more of a sort of push-pull with my shot, and it's coming in, and I think it will make a difference eventually. But what's made the biggest difference for me is sort of keeping it still. And it does sort of lurch forward as I release, because I'm pushing against the waist of the bow to keep my arm in that position. But it's not an active movement, it's quite sort of passive. My arm is there. Once I extend, that's the position it's in, and literally then all I'm doing is moving this around, and it keeps it in position. So another thing you might notice about my shot is my anchor point is a little bit different. My under the chin anchor point is quite a bit different actually to convention. So I don't know how that's going to come across. So rather than having a really flat anchor point on the front of my face, my anchor point sits across this side of my nose and this side of my cheek. And what that allows me to do is that lets me to look through the string rather than having the string on sort of this side of the bow or on this in this line. And the reason I've shot like that is because having that string picture on this side has allowed me to shoot straight, really, aim in the middle of the target, and not have to aim off. So a problem a lot of longbows have is that arrows will go in this direction, wherever they're shooting. If the arrow's on this side, it'll float this way. If the arrow's on this side, it'll float that way. And that can be down to a number of things, such as your anchor point and your facial geometry, or just the difficulty in matching an arrow spine to an English longbow. But having that open string picture is something that I've heard a few people do, something I was told about after I discovered it myself by accident. But it's really transformed my shooting ability. I went from putting like 3 or 4 arrows on at 70 metres, because I had to aim like 2 bosses across, to getting all of them on, and now I'm shooting really good scores. And it was literally, as soon as I flipped that string from there to there, it made all that difference. But I've done it so much now, it's such a ingrained part of my shooting technique that it's really difficult for me to change that anchor point. If I wanted to move my string picture back across, it will be very difficult for me, and it'll take a lot of time, I think. So it's, as my shots developed and as I've gotten looser and I'm able to turn my head a bit more and things like that, I'm needing slightly stiffer arrows. But it's my preference to shoot a slightly stiffer arrow and aim sort of on the right hand edge, so I can still look at the spot that I want to hit, kind of in my peripheral vision. So just again to show you what that looks like. And I'll just loose one. Another thing that I do that's been very helpful for me is when I'm at anchor point, it only really works for the under the chin style shot, but I managed to get the string, bury it into my chest. I don't know whether that's a product of me having not so good alignment, just the size of my body in general, something to do with my body position, but having that string in there helps to create the stability on this side, and it really gives me a lot more to pull against, to pull into. My anchor point might look quite light on my face when it's there, because it is. I'm not extremely ripping the string into my face like a coach once told me to do for recurve shooting. But it is quite tight into my body, and when I'm there, all I'm thinking about and all I'm feeling is bringing that scapula around, rotating the shoulder blade around, and coming out of the shot. When I'm shooting sort of the off the face style, for when I'm gap shooting for field and stuff, I'm not able to get the string anywhere near my body, so it's quite open. Step and shape for now. Don't know how well that comes across, but there's quite a big gap between my anchor point and the string here. Again, a product perhaps of my terrible alignment, but because of the way that I set my front shoulder and the way I set my back, I'm able to keep it relatively consistent. And a way you can help yourself with that is if you have your arrows cut to length, you'll know that you're keeping a consistent draw length, because the only real problem with this that I've encountered occasionally is I feel like I'm in the right position, I'm doing the right thing, but I'm actually like this or overextending or whatever, and I'm shooting high and low and I don't know what's going on. But I've been able to maintain some consistency by doing this with a longer arrow, because that's my preference for gap shooting. And it seems to work okay. But again, the same thing's happening. I'm just working on about pulling my release back with my hand. My preferred position for the release is sort of like under the jawbone here. I find this not quite as comfortable as here, and then the third finger one is, the higher it goes, the more difficult I find getting proper back tension, and I fear that my release is more a product of me pulling my arm back. But yeah, that's essentially how I shoot the longbow. I'll shoot some more shots from different angles so you can see more what I'm doing, more of what I'm doing. But that's how it's done. I shoot target with a recurve tab. This just happens to be a brass KSL gold tab. They're quite popular. The weight I don't think makes all that much difference, but it's just the one I got it. I paid a lot of money for it, or it's quite expensive, so I thought I'm going to use it. And I do like it now. It's become my preferred target tab. And when I'm shooting off the face, I shoot basically anything that doesn't have something on it that's going to get in the way. And that happens to be a Chaos Soul, just completely bare. So I don't know how this is going to come out. And target style shooting, I'm either shooting with a little rubber band, a little O-ring, or a ground marker. I find both of them just as accurate. The only benefit to perhaps the band over the ground marker is it's easy to adjust in between arrows if you make a catastrophic error, or if it's moved by mistake. And outdoors, where we're affected a bit more by the weather, it can be easier to adjust. And that's essentially how I shoot the English longbow. I don't shoot with a glove. I don't feel like you need to shoot with a glove. Provided you set your knock point high enough, you're going to get clearance of your hand and you're going to get really nice arrow flight. It can be a benefit, I think, to feel, particularly a pile if you've got arrows cut to length. That can be quite useful. And a glove, I found when I used to wear a glove that sometimes it would sit funny on my hand, especially as it gets more and more worn. It's never the same for more than a couple of months at a time. The shoulder thing being something that I find probably the most important for my shot, and the release, the rest of it, you can do what you like with your feet position, your body position. I stand with I have a pretty closed, is it closed? No, a pretty neutral stance. My feet are kind of the same sort of place. It's slightly open sometimes. I used to shoot with a closed stance because I thought it would get my body around a bit more. Whatever's comfortable for you. I'd suggest sticking with the parallel stance or maybe a slightly open stance. I've tried the whole rotating the body thing, and that's quite nice, but I've not found it's as consistent for me as just planting my shoulder and then straight pulling back. Or pulling round, shall I say. But having a little bit of a pre-draw, I like doing, just to get some tension on the muscles before I'm going to use them. So I'm here. And there we go. So I hope that wasn't as complicated as I perhaps made it out to be, or made it sound. what I'm trying to tell you is actually quite straightforward, I think. But hopefully that was useful to some of you. Please let me know if it was. Please let me know if you think I'm crazy. And if there's anything you think, or anything that you do differently, I'm curious to see how everyone shoots, because the beautiful thing about Longbow is there are so many different techniques and so many different styles and so many different ways of shooting. It's really spectacular to watch from the Longbow line. But it really is sort of like a lottery as to what particular style fits a certain person, because we've all got different, although the fundamentals of archery are essentially the same and can be applied to every bow style, we're all slightly different in terms of like things like the length of our arms, the shape of our face, the shape of our bodies, and what's just comfortable. So yeah, please let me know how you shoot, because I'm very interested, and let me know if there's anything that you think would help me, and hopefully this helps you. So thanks for watching.